Welcome back. We are now back from recess. And before we recessed for lunch, we were joined by the Chief Prosecutor, Mr. John Bradley, and gave us some detailed comments and good comments about some of the criminal justice reform bills. And if there are no objections from the members at this time, I'd like to address specific bills, 22-38. 22 dash and 22-58 today. 22-38 is to amend Title 6, Division 5, Chapter 3, Article 2, Protection of Abused Children, to enact a new subsection 5326, the discovery of evidence of child abuse or recordings of child witnesses, and for other purposes. And this was introduced by myself. Are there any discussions on this bill at this time? Ready? We will now act on this bill and take a vote on it. Are there any discussions on that? Can I get a motion to pass this bill out of committee? A motion has been made and has been seconded. Are there any discussions on the motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This bill, House Bill number 22-38, has passed the committee, and the legislative assistant, Mr. Cameron Diaz, will work on the committee report. Cameron Nicholas, and will submit it to the House. Thank you. Representative Tina Saplana, acknowledged.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for the purposes of the committee report, I'd like to ask that we include some of the supporting documents that were submitted by the Chief Prosecutor in the drafting of the bill. I think that would be important to make it part of the record. And I'd be happy to forward that to the LA. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Sablan. Next up, we will be acting on House Bill 22-58 to amend 7 CMC subsection 4101 to lower the interest rate of civil money judgments from 9% to 3%. And this was filed by Representative Richard Lazama for himself and other members. Are there any discussions on this bill? Recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do understand that this bill has been introduced before, but maybe just for the record, I guess, if the author and perhaps our LA or legal counsel could give us additional background on, the importance of the bill and also its history, because I understand it's been passed before, right? So yeah, I'd just like to ask for that at this time.
Can I start first?
Recognize Representative Lazama.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And thank you, Chairwoman Tina Sablan, for bringing it up. One of the reasons that this bill is important, we have so many people in our island are making less than so much money. And if the bill, if the judgment is at 9%, we have problems seeing them fulfilling what they're supposed to pay for. That was, was granted by the judge. So by lowering it down, it allows the individual to at least expedite on making all these payments, and it's affordable. That's the reason why that is important to have this bill lowered down to from 9% to 3%. And so that's my comments.
Just clarify with the legal counsel.
Recognize Representative Tina Sablan.
So this bill would only be effective going forward for any judgments that would be awarded after the enactment of this bill? Not judgments that are still yet to be paid that are being assessed at the 9% rate?
Council?
Thank you. Yes, per section 5, the effective date is the approval by the governor. So the answer to your question is yes. And generally speaking, we do not legislate retroactively, but it is in this particular instance, I think, very important to note that this is definitely a prospective measure. The only thing that you might want to be concerned about is sometimes judgments are not reduced to a final judgment, and that final judgment actually triggers the percentage. And until then, arguably, it's not a final judgment, and it's an actual technical term of art that needs to be satisfied for the judgment to actually lock in at 9%. Otherwise, I believe it's 20% prejudgment. So once that final judgment is rendered and issued, then the 9% would start. And in this particular case, if this bill is signed into law, then anything that's pending without the final judgment, even though one side is technically won, arguably this would apply.
Why
Because
why
of
would there
judgment,
be a judgment without a final judgment?
the court needs to issue it. So the litigation's over and the judge needs to issue a final judgment. You have officially won, even though the jury ruled in your favor.
Okay.
So that's the only time where there would be a little bit of a dispute as to when, in fact, this would apply.
Okay.
So I want to make clear to you that absent a final judgment,
Mhm.
there is no judgment to apply the 3% to.
Okay.
So
But in the
just so you know,
cases where there are final judgments,
then this should be fine.
upon this bill taking effect as law, so if there is a final judgment, anything happening after, as a final judgment after this bill is
Right.
enacted, would be assessed at the 3% rate.
Right.
But if there is a
Pending-
judgment, if there's a final judgment that has yet to be fully satisfied,
Right.
and there are still payments that need to be made, that 9% would still accrue
No.
until the payment is
No,
satisfied.
no one's making a payment unless there is a final judgment. So
Mhm.
the final judgment is one side wins, one side loses, or both sides lose. The
Right.
judge renders a final judgment. That document is then issued. That triggers the 9%.
Right. But what I'm asking is, once the final judgment has been issued,
Okay.
and the party that has to pay this judgment is in the middle of making payments,
Uh-huh.
like let's say they worked out like a payment plan with the
Right.
court or whatever,
Right.
that like this bill taking effect during that process would not affect the interest rate. It would still be at the 9%
That's correct.
until fully satisfied.
That's correct.
Okay.
The other issue to consider is what happens if there is a large amount of money in litigation and one side appeals, and the only way to appeal is that there is a final judgment. Now that the final judgment has been rendered, now there's an appellate jurisdiction like to be had, right? So what happens if they win? What would normally happen is this 9% or 3% wouldn't be final because there's an appeal now. So,
Okay.
So not to make it too technical, what would happen if they did lose the appeal, then it would be 9% from the date of the actual final judgment,
Right.
not the date they
It would
lost
stop the
appeal.
clock though, right? It should,
Um,
if there's a pending appeal.
yeah, there should be a tolling of
Yeah.
the payments
Hmm.
and arguably a tolling of the accrual of money.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then just one last question. Is there any need for any transition language at all?
Probably not, because we have the understanding that legislatively it's prospective.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you. I yield and I'm ready.
Thank you, Rep. Sablon. At this time, we will take a vote on this bill. Are there any other further discussions before we vote?
Ready, Chair.
Okay, none? All those in favor of passing this bill, House Bill 22-58,
Madam Chair,
I'm
I
sorry.
move
Oh, go ahead.
for passage. I move to consider House Bill 22-58 for passage.
Thank you, Rep. Maglonia. There's a motion on the floor, and it has been seconded. Are there any discussions on the motion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. House Bill 22-58 is hereby passed by this committee. Those are the only bills that we will be acting on this afternoon. We do want to, moving on to the next order of business, miscellaneous. Does anybody have any miscellaneous business or announcements? At this time, if there are none, I would like to make the announcements for House Bill 22-59. I'm sorry, 22-58. I mean, 22-59 to rename the San Vicente Elementary School to Moses Tidinko Fairhaven Elementary School will be, we will set a public hearing for that. Also, House Bill 22-60 to amend 1 CMC subsection 4 to 5 by renaming the Youth Center within the Commissioner Joaquin S. Tudela Community Park in San Vicente, Saipan as the Prudencio Cabrera Youth Center and for other purposes. That will also be scheduled for a public hearing, as well as House Bill 22-65 to amend 3 CMC subsection 2822F to rename the Commonwealth Health Center on Saipan as the Dr. Carlos S. Camacho Commonwealth Health Center, pre-filed by Representative Vicente Camacho. Those three will be scheduled for a public hearing later on this month. And if there are no other discussions, I recognize Representative Richard Lazama.
Thank you, Chairwoman. With this 2259 and 60, will they be just a public hearing in the precinct? And of course, the hospital will be the island-wide. Is that how it should work?
Yes, 22-59 and 60 will be in precinct 1, but I will also include 2265 in the precinct 1 public hearing and then conduct another one specifically for 2265 island-wide. Are there any
Thank you for clarification.
discussions, further discussions? If not, can I get a motion for adjournment?
Second.
There's a motion on the floor to adjourn this meeting. It has been seconded. Any discussions on the motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. This meeting is hereby adjourned. It is now 1:59 PM. Thank you.